Beware.
Welcome back to Viewer Beware. It's a series where we go over each and every episode of the Goosebumps TV show, and tonight we have a very special, squiggly, wiggly episode with Go Eat Worms. Now, Go Eat Worms is a very special episode because horror you can break down into certain pillars. There are certain columns that make up the coliseum that is horror. Unfortunately, because Goosebumps is a children's TV show, a lot of those columns are off limits. But we have gotten creature features and supernatural thrillers, and tonight we get the final pillar, gross out horror. Well, not final, but it's one of them. Now, a lot of people will say that gross out horror is a cheap pop in the horror community, like a Human Centipede or a Cannibal Holocaust, but they serve to create images that give you the oogie woogies. And that's sort of what tonight's episode's all about. You see, tonight we're watching a show where a kid torments small animals until they get their revenge. Sure, we've seen it before, but have we seen it with a 20-foot worm? I think not. So without further ado, let's crack them, get that squiggly footage going, roll that tape.
Worms are nature's perfect creatures. They aerate the soil, recycle waste, and
they gross out girls when you drop them down their backs.
Our story tonight starts with dissecting worms, as our heroes Todd and Danny are in the basement explaining how they are nature's perfect creature. Todd and Danny are getting a school project ready, and in order to get all of their data, they need to do heavy experiments on these worms to the point of torture. Todd's sister Reggie is also doing the same project about the life cycle of a robin that she claims will beat the boys' worms. Pause. However, when she reaches for a robin display, she's in for a surprise.
worms! Must have been something it ate.
Reggie blames Todd for sabotaging her project and swears revenge, but Todd doesn't seem to take it seriously.
Ooh, I'm so scared.
Ew! You're as slimy as those worms you tortured!
At school the next day, Todd and Danny are admiring the worm's ability to gross out girls, and Todd always uses them to prank Reggie. When the boys sit down for lunch, Todd offers to swap lunches with Danny and outlines ideas for the project. Meanwhile, Danny is in for a surprise as well.
Something died in there.
This prank is textbook Todd, but he swears he had nothing to do with it. Later on in Todd's house, we see that his bedroom is practically a shrine to worms, freaking out his mom. Todd talks to his mom about how Reggie spiked his food, to which she says he kinda deserved it, and how he needs to stop focusing so much on worms.
Crazy about worms!
I just think they're cool, that's all.
I know, but you should have some other interests. There's a whole big world of really disgusting things out there just waiting to be discovered.
After Todd goes to sleep, we see his house is practically infested with worms, which Todd realizes when he gets a face full of them. Todd wakes up screaming, blaming Reggie for it, but his mom assures him that Reggie is at a friend's house for the night. Confused, Todd packs up his rogue worms and goes back to bed. At school the next day, Todd tries to patch things up with Danny, which he is reluctant to hear, until Todd tells him about the wormy bed incident.
Last night she even came into my room and put worms in my bed.
Really? Gross.
Todd has a plan to get Reggie back, and then confronts her and her friend about the random worm appearances. But Reggie has no clue what he's talking about.
You've got worms on the brain. Just ignore him, Beth. Well, I always do. Worms on the brain? Worms on the brain! Worms on the brain! Worms on the brain!
Not believing his little sister, he still decides to enact his revenge by collecting more and more worms to use as ammo. But his worm hunt goes awry when he's sucked into, dare I say, a worm hole.
Someone!
Down in the wormy depths, Todd investigates a cavern until he finds graffiti left specifically for him. By the time he reads this, he realizes he's ankle deep in a worm pile and can't get out. Eventually, after wriggling free, he comes face to face with a gigantic worm that attempts to drag him back into the cavern until it's scared off by the model robin Reggie and her friend are carrying. Shooketh by the events, Todd gets rid of all of his worm and worm memorabilia and helps Reggie rebuild the robin that he had destroyed earlier. The next day, Todd and Danny go fishing, revealing that Todd's new obsession is fish, explaining his new experiments that would essentially torture the fish.
All we need is a few experiments. How long can fish live in hot water or cold water? How long can a freshwater fish survive in salt water? Stuff like that.
Isn't that kind of cruel? I mean, like, making them suffer like that?
Don't be such a baby. We've got to be scientific about this. I'm telling you, fish can't feel anything. I hope I catch one. Can't wait to start my experiment.
So, what are we gonna call this fish experiment?
Fish. Nature survivors. I'm gonna have a bite of your sandwich, okay?
My sandwich? I thought it was your sandwich.
Pretty good. So anyway, Todd goes from small animal to small animal, just not learning his lesson, torturing them more and more. In the book, actually, he moves on to butterflies, and the butterflies have enough of his shit, and then they just stab him with a pin. It seems like Todd's on the fast track to go to serial killer town, but that's more of a Tales from the Crypt episode. Actually, as a cool side note, the actor that played Todd went on to be a DJ and producer under the name of 40, and he went on to co-found OVO with Drake. So aside from Ryan Gosling, he's probably the most famous Goosebumps alum. But Go Eat Worms is a solid episode. Todd did a good job with his role of child bully. I really felt like he embodied it well. It's just there wasn't enough gross out to really justify a lot of what happened. I mean, sure, the spaghetti worms were pretty gross, but they kind of let him off easy with their punishment. I feel like worms are just pretty benevolent in that way, I guess. But overall, I would give Go Eat Worms a 2.5 out of 5. Check it out. It's pretty good. If you don't check it out, you're not really missing anything too great, but that's just my opinion. And I'll catch you guys next time on Viewer Beware.